Hi there, my name is John Thompson, and this is Simple Money. And this is a conversation from a generational perspective between my son, David, and myself. We talk generally about money, finance, real estate sometimes, life, and how these things are revolving around each other, and how he might view it differently than I might view it. And so that's our conversation. Today, David's going to tell you what we're going to be kind of just chatting about.
So today we're going to talk about the evolution of physical money, what I like to call it as from barter to Bitcoin. So going through kind of the origins of money, what is money, and then all the way to kind of where money is today and what our relationship is, what my relationship with that is, and kind of what we might think of where it's going in the future. So we'll touch on quickly what is money. And we teach this in our cash and liability mastery class. This is a kind of a first slide or two of that, but money has to have a store of value, meaning that it could be used in the future. I can get paid in something today that would still work in the future. It has to have a unit of account. So it's socially accepted and it's a standard of which things are priced and a payment could be accepted. So if I'm paying $20 when I give the person at the cash register a $40 or $50 bill, we both understand that that's $30 back to me, right? And then it has to have a medium of exchange or widely accepted. So that's kind of what is money. And from there, we want to talk about our relationship with money growing up. So why don't you touch on kind of what was your relationship with money growing up? Kind of everything from cash to bank accounts, credit cards, how you got paid, anything like that.
Sure. So I'm going to start and talk just a little bit about why is it even important to have this conversation. So I think that many of the decisions we make as adults, and certainly as we age, oftentimes revolve around money. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of misunderstanding, relationships are impacted by it. The way we choose to live our lives, unfortunately, is probably heavily impacted by money. And we're not talking about it in this global sense necessarily, but I know we're really talking today about the physical stuff like bills and how we grew up. But I think the more you think about your own history and your own pattern of money, it helps you maybe become more aware. I just want people to become more aware of how money might be operating in their life and how it's affecting their decisions in a positive or a negative way. So just think about it from that standpoint. I was born in 1965. I grew up as a teenager in the 70s and early 80s and so forth, in high school and all that kind of stuff. And this was it. I mean, you were trying to find ways to get your hands on as many bills or coins as you could. Right, because that's what was important to us. We knew that if you had some of those bills, maybe you could buy stuff with that. I don't think that we were impacted as much sort of with the consumerism sentiment that maybe exists more prevalently today in 2023. But at the time, you still wanted to have cash because it gave you some power, it gave you some freedom. Right, if you had your own money, you could do things separately. I can still remember just trying to find ways to get quarters. Like I could get a buck from somebody for doing a chore. And I'd go convert that into quarters. I could go down and play video games, right? So, that was a big thing for us in junior high. So literally ride your skateboard and go to a video game place and maybe you had 8 quarters and you just hope that lasted an hour, which it rarely did. That was it. But money, at least in my case, in my family, we had a very, very minor allowance. It wasn't really an allowance. It was more an exchange for doing stuff, probably much like I taught you and your brothers. And so that was it. But we never had a ton of money. It was never a ton of cash, right? I had this $1 bill here, and that was like a big deal to have a buck, right? Get coins. And if you got something for Christmas, you got $5 from your grandmother. That was a huge amount of money at the time. I realized early on that you had to trade effort to get this cash. So one of the other things that I noticed is very few people have checks anymore. It was a kind of a big kind of rite of passage to learn how to write a check. I can still remember my mom teaching me how to write a check in a parking lot at high school, saying, okay, here's this thing, you write the person's name here, you write out the dollar amount, the numbers and digits, and then you sign it. And then don't forget to write down here what it was for, because we won't remember. We got to look back at it later on and all those kind of things. And that was a big deal. That was like, you felt like an adult because you had a checkbook. So that was the first idea that money existed outside of the physical transformation of money, because it was money sitting in an account or a bank, right? And these banks were these mythical things. Wow, banks, such a big deal. There's all that money over there. So it took a while to realize that money existed in other forms than just the cash, right? And so forth. And of course, once you got to college, now we're in the 80s and so forth, then all that kind of stuff was a little more prevalent, but it's expanded tremendously since then. right? And so how would that compare to your sort of experience with cash early on or money early on?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned checks because I was just talking to a buddy and we were talking about actually writing a check, and bet that if I asked 10 of my friends who could write a check, I bet 8 of them would probably say, I don't know how to write a check. Going to myself about writing a check, I mean, I never wrote a check growing up, I wouldn't say. And recently had to write some checks for work. And I had to look up the first time I wrote the check, how should I make it out? Weirdly enough. So and that's funny. But yeah, I would say the same thing kind of growing up younger. You have cash and you have dollars, you have your piggy bank and whatnot. And I know you guys had a maybe checking account for me with whatever might have been in there. I have no idea. But I didn't really start using that until I remember having a checking account going into high school. So I know I had it then. But yeah, no, everything was always cash, going to the movies in middle school and whatnot. It was always cash. And that was from the allowance of whatever we did around the house and whatnot. But yeah, I know. I remember the first time I went out, it was in high school. We went somewhere as a group trip for school. I had to buy lunch. And I remember sitting there and I didn't have any cash in my wallet. And I had my debit card from whenever I opened my checking account, freshman year of high school. And I had never used it. I still had the sticker on it that said, call this number to activate. So I had to sit there and call the number to activate. And I think that once I activated that day, I don't think I ever really have used cash since then. I've used my debit card since then. And then, of course, it's expanded into credit cards and Venmo and Apple Pay and whatever from it would be all kind of digital at this point. It's weird thinking about money and it's really just a number on your telephone screen in kind of my perspective, or it has been in the last couple of years. And so that's it. I think it's interesting because you're holding up $1 and I would hold up, okay, here's my wallet right here.
Yeah,
my phone, my Apple Pay. So, that's
so next, where is it going? What do we think?
Exactly. I think that's a question that's hard to answer. And I think there's a lot of good technology coming out, or a lot of good money coming out. Everybody has heard of cryptocurrency, or I hope everybody has heard of cryptocurrency at this point. And are we going in that direction? Is it Bitcoin? Is it Ethereum? Is it one of these other million coins that you've heard about? I don't know. But I think the rise of at least online banking, and I think eventually the adoption of cryptocurrencies will make it easier to transact worldwide and cheaper and more transparent and all those types of things. So that's probably where we're going in the short term. Whether or not everybody wants to believe that, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have an answer either, but I do think that the money will not be the same in the future. It can't be. Our world is too interconnected. And if it's a crypto coin that's unregulated, or is it a government-backed, crypto exchange of some kind, I don't know. That's a whole nother subject to talk about. Yeah. Who can see the stuff and not see the stuff, and privacy matters and all those kinds of things. I think it's interesting to think about, what if crypto doesn't become the medium of exchange? What if that isn't, because people are fearful of adopting a government-backed coin, but there's too much risk in other stuff? I don't personally think there's a lot of risk in it, but I know there are a lot of people that do.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think we've grown more to trust digital stuff than other things over the last several years. So I don't know where that goes. Does suddenly this become your money, or does it become some other barter or exchange? And I've thought, I see people now starting to exchange services, and people that are, worried about intervention and these sorts of things. And I don't know if that's the answer or where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to think that we might be heading in a direction where the old idea of two neighbors exchanging something valuable to themselves, like a barter transaction, could be actually become part of what we do.
You think we could revert back to barter?
I think there could be an element of it. I think it's interesting with technology and the ability of different platforms to do, exchange of labor.
Yeah.
What if I'm willing to exchange a period of time for my labor to get something from someone else? They have a farm, they grew something, and they give me that, but I exchange time to create some piece of digital thing that they need. I don't know. I think all the things interesting.
Yeah.
I think all the platforms exist for people to transact in ways that don't involve money anymore. It involves our brain and our human power and those sorts of things. I don't think that's not going to replace money, but I think it'll be an element of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So who really knows? And then one of the questions, when you think about money, how does inflation affect all these different things, right? So we talk a lot about inflation in our classes. And right now, during 2023, we have this rapid rise of inflation, which is eroding the value of money. So your $100, 3 months ago would buy $100 worth of goods, and now it will buy $70 worth of goods, the same $100 bill, or $100 token, or $100 Bitcoin, whatever it's going to be. Right. And how's that going to affect us in the future? That's why I think there might be maybe a rise in this other way of exchanging things, simply because it's not affected by inflation in the same way.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of touching on inflation and I guess Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and whatnot. I don't know that there's a way to perfectly intersect the two at this point because Bitcoin was what $66,000 last year and now it's 20 or $24,000. So it's kind of hard to correlate those exactly when the risk and the kind of fluctuations in the price of what a Bitcoin is actually worth is ever changing today. Maybe that's not true in the future. At least today, it's kind of tough to put a nail on that.
Well, which brings up a whole nother point then. All right, so let's think. So why does the value of Bitcoin go up and down? It's because we believe that in dollars,
Yeah,
right, that we can get more of those. Like, oh, so if I have one Bitcoin, I can get 66,000 of those versus 22,000, whatever it is today. It's so now we're still anchoring it,
yeah,
old form of money.
of course.
And I think that's where there's this going to change at some point because it won't be anchored in that anymore. I just thought of a great, it just popped in my head, sort of the idea of exchanging of labor for stuff. So let's think about miners, Bitcoin miners. What are they doing? They're not getting paid money, are they? They're doing labor. They're, it's very high level labor using your brain to solve these equations and so forth, but that's labor. And in exchange for that labor, they're getting a digital token that for some reason has value in dollars.
Yeah.
But what if it wasn't tied to dollars? They would still do the same work because now it has value in some other way. And I think that's what's interesting.
That is interesting. Well, yeah, it's the first people who were mining the first Bitcoins. They were getting paid a bunch of these coins that were essentially worthless.
Exactly.
Who knows where that goes in the future? I don't really know.
Cool. Anyway, it's all about education.
Yeah, exactly. I think that brings to the next point of, when have you been or have you ever been skeptical about a new way to interact with money or adopting a new form of money? I mean, you mentioned a check or a credit card or whatever. Have you ever been skeptical?
I personally have not been skeptical. In some ways, I personally have adopted to things maybe more rapidly than some of my peers of my age, because I like new things. I'm always interested in new things. And I like learning from other people. But I do think there are people that are skeptical about it. But what does skepticism mean? It's just fear of the unknown. That's all it is. Right. And so I think a word of advice for people maybe listen to at some point that if you don't understand something, you got to research it and learn about it and talk to the people that do know about it. That way you may not adopt it, but you don't need to have fear about things. It's just fear that you don't understand it, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I had the same thought. If I was ever skeptical, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I know I didn't put my credit card on my Apple Pay the first day that came out. I waited a little while, learned about it, read about it, found out that it was safe, and then did it. And now I don't even go to the store with a wallet because I can use my phone. Even if we're talking about cryptocurrency, sure, the first time I heard about it, it didn't make sense to me. You learn about it, you do your research, and then, okay, now this makes sense. And maybe it's something that you want to try to adopt and use in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the key is learning there.
Yeah. Well, and so think about just in the very brief amount of time that we've gone from the skepticism around attaching a credit card, what's a credit card? It's not money. Right. So, I mean, even a credit card people were skeptical about that when they first got like, well, what is that? Why would I do that? Or a debit card or those kind of things. It's just a representation of money. We all have to agree as value, like I said, but how quickly do we go from that credit card and then attaching it to Apple Pay or to Venmo or whatever else to buying your gas on this now, right? Literally walking up to something and tapping it and you've purchased something and you never saw it, which is a whole separate conversation about spending and consumerism. And the easier it is to spend, people spend more, don't save. All right. And we want people to save.
Sure. Do you think it makes it easier to, I guess, spend money now that you don't have to physically touch a dollar bill or touch a coin and you can just tap your phone? Do you think that could have an impact on?
Well, there's two sides to that, right? So yeah, so for people that understand the technology and don't have skepticism, it's easier to spend money and you don't notice it. For people that don't adapt or adopt, that process, maybe it's harder to spend money. There are places that don't take cash anymore.
Yeah, that's
so. What do you do? So people that don't adapt to that, are they shut out of some new economy? Are they shut out of certain things? Maybe.
Yeah. Who knows? Okay, well, any new money features that you've ran across in the near term that you think are cool or that anybody would like to know about?
No, not really. I'll just share a quick experience that I had today. I remembered that I created a digital wallet for some crypto that I held in Bitcoin. I completely forgotten about it. I actually have, again, not to make it about crypto, but I have both a physical hard wallet, but I also have digital one. And I forgot that money there. It was actually quite challenging to get into it and figure out how I could transfer it into a place, an intermediary to another intermediary to be able to actually get the cash, right? It's like 4 steps removed. So I don't really, there's no idea there other than if you adopt things, pay attention to what you're doing, and understand it, because I can tell you as we all age, in my world, some of those things, if you don't use them on a regular basis, you forget how to do things and you forget how to use them.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it. That's all I got.
Okay.
What about you, though?
We kind of touched on it, many things. I think there's money features out there that most of us may have used or are familiar with without even knowing it. Touching on like online banking or any of those things, that's relatively new and we all use that. I don't go to the bank anymore. But talking about our industry specific, if we're talking about mortgage or lending as a broader topic, and I know me and you have chatted about this, but kind of goes with the open banking concept of sharing financial information instantly. And, why does a mortgage take 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is? Why can't it be instantaneous? I think this will, in the future with open banking and the ability to share instantly your financial information, your income, whatever it might be, makes things easier, cheaper, more efficient, faster, whatever it is. Yeah, probably more secure as well than what's happening now. And I also think that it, brings inclusion in as well, as you can maybe not everybody has a credit card, so it doesn't have access to a credit report or whatnot. But if you're able to share your financial information, instantly, and there's other ways to prove that you're a worthy person of getting a loan from something to start your own business or whatever it might be, right? So I think there's things like that are positive and that are expanding rapidly.
So the correlation to that is blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, not to go off into the deep end around blockchain, but blockchain is probably really the most valuable part of what's coming through the cryptocurrency world, because of blockchain of transactions. So there's no reason that all my health data couldn't be stored on the blockchain. So there's no reason all our financial information couldn't be stored on the blockchain and accessible with permission to the people that might need that to make decisions around both health or finances or education, whatever it might be. So I think that's coming. Maybe it's a few years out. And not that you need to understand how blockchain works, but at some point people had faith and belief in banks, and they had faith and belief that the numbers on their bank statement were real and that money would be there if and when they went to the bank to get it. They had faith and belief in that. And I bet it took several decades. I don't know, because the belief was there when I started using it. So, but I bet before that it wasn't. I think that the blockchain way of transacting will probably become very prevalent within the next 5 or 10. And if you don't understand it, I don't think you have to understand it, but you have to learn to believe that it's there. And it is, from my perspective, safer than, quite frankly, banking.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's another thing about the whole digital world. It's probably much safer, even if you're just thinking about using your fingerprint or facial recognition to do exchanges of money, that's probably safer than it was in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Totally. So good. Savology is a tool that we use. It's free to our friends, clients, partners, friends of friends. We'll have a link to it here with notes along with the show. Savology is a great financial planning tool. Dave, let's talk a little bit about the education that's in there.
Yeah, the education is great. There's, simple topics that range from budgeting to what are certain type of retirement accounts. And even, talking about our kind of interesting topic today about cryptocurrencies, whatnot, it even touches on Bitcoin. What is cryptocurrency? So there's a wide range of topics, and it's pretty easy to understand and use. It's a great tool.
Yeah. And it's free, right? It's free to our friends and clients. You've got to sign up through us, but it's free for you. All right. Great talk, Dave. Thanks for the fun subject. Anything else you want to share?
That's it. That's it for today. Thank you.
All right. Good times. And we will be back here for our occasional podcast called Simple Money. And feel free to reach out to David, myself, or our team anytime to talk about finance in general, mortgages in specific. Thanks very much. Have a great day.